Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide. A reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that Joseph Smith's first vision clarified that Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ are separate and distinct beings, correcting many misunderstandings about the Godhead? Learn that God called Joseph by his first name during the vision, and how this teaches us that God knows each of us personally and individually. Discover how Joseph's prayer set a pattern for a way we can seek answers to our own questions, and how our prayers can bring guidance, comfort, and understanding.
I want you to imagine, just for a second, that you are 14 years old.
Okay, 14.
Yeah, you're 14, you are trying to figure out the world, and you're feeling just completely confused by all the conflicting information around you.
Right, the classic teenage experience, honestly.
Totally. And, there's all these heated arguments from the adults in your life, and you decide to do something, well, incredibly bold.
Oh, yeah.
You find a single, really specific sentence in an ancient book, and you decide to just go out and run an empirical test on it.
I love this framing. Yeah.
You decide to just see if it actually works.
It is a phenomenal premise for a narrative. You have this ultimate high-stakes test of an abstract philosophical idea, and it's being conducted by a teenager in the woods.
Exactly. And today, we're doing a deep dive into the source material behind that exact event. We're looking at a foundational religious text that describes a singular, highly specific morning in the year 1820.
Right, which is known historically as Joseph Smith's first vision.
Yeah, the first vision. And from that really brief event, the document we're analyzing today extracts a framework of, profound world-altering claims.
Yeah, there are 6 core truths it pulls from this.
6 restored truths, right? But before we look at the cosmic shock waves this allegedly caused, we do have to lay down a crucial ground rule for our conversation today.
That is essential, because we really are wading into deeply significant waters here.
We really are. The sources we're looking at today contain very specific theological claims.
Right.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We have to start by setting the physical scene, because the narrative is extremely grounded in time and place before it takes a hard left turn into the metaphysical.
It is very specific.
Yeah, it's a clear spring morning in 1820. We are in rural upstate New York. And this 14-year-old boy, Joseph Smith, walks out into a grove of trees near his family's farm.
And he goes there with a very specific solitary purpose, right?
Yeah, to pray aloud for the first time in his life.
And the source material actually provides us with the psychological catalyst for that walk into the woods.
Right, the context.
Yeah, he had been caught in the middle of this severe religious excitement in his community. Ministers arguing over congregations, family members joining different sects.
Just total chaos for a kid.
Complete chaos. He was paralyzed by the confusion of who was right. And during all this, he was reading the Bible and landed on a very specific verse in the book of James.
Ah, yes, James chapter 1, verse 5.
Right. The narrative quotes it directly as the spark that ignited the whole event. It says, "If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him."
I love looking at how different people interact with texts. And this is such a striking, almost startling example to me.
How so?
Well, it's like you read a poetic line in an instruction manual.
Yeah.
One of the sweeping metaphorical promises that people usually interpret as just a nice sentiment.
Right, like find your inner peace.
Exactly. But he decided to just literally press the button to see what the machine would do. He didn't read it as an allegory.
No, not at all.
He read it as a direct, mechanical set of instructions. If you lack wisdom, ask God. So he went to ask.
What's fascinating here is the sheer unvarnished literalism of his approach. He took the text at its absolute word, and then the narrative describes the event itself, the result of him pressing that metaphysical button, as you said.
And the description is wild.
It is vivid, but it's also remarkably concise. As he's kneeling and trying to pray, he recounts, "I saw a pillar of light exactly over my head, above the brightness of the sun, which descended gradually until it fell upon me."
Above the brightness of the sun. Just pause and think about the sensory overload of that.
Oh, yeah.
That is an intense, blinding visual, and it doesn't stop with just a light anomaly.
No, it escalates rapidly. The account continues. "When the light rested upon me, I saw 2 personages whose brightness and glory defy all description, standing above me in the air."
Defy all description.
And then the interaction happens. One of these personages calls Joseph by name, points to the other, and delivers a single, incredibly dense sentence.
Right.
This is my beloved son. Hear him.
Okay, so we have this incredibly brief, visually overwhelming encounter in the woods. A pillar of light, two beings, one sentence.
Just a few minutes, really.
Yeah, just a few minutes on a Tuesday morning or whatever day it was. But this brings us to the first major conceptual pivot in our source material.
Right, the theological fallout.
Because the document claims that this brief vision did something structurally massive to human history. It claims it ended centuries of uncertainty about the very nature of God.
Yes.
And, I have to push back on the text here for a second, or at least ask the obvious question.
Go for it.
Didn't people already believe in God in 1820? Christianity had been the dominant cultural force in the West for nearly 2 millennia. Why does this narrative insist there were centuries of uncertainty that suddenly needed ending?
That is the pivotal question. And really, it's the only way to understand the first two major claims or truths that are outlined in our source.
Okay.
The narrative is proposing that the understanding of God's actual nature had been corrupted over time due to what it terms spiritual darkness. So it isn't arguing that people stopped believing in a higher power. It's arguing that their definition of who and what that power was had become fundamentally structurally inaccurate.
So what is the correction then? In the worldview of this document, what is the first big truth that comes out of the Grove?
The first claim is that God the Father has a literal, tangible, physical body, and that humanity is physically made in his image.
A physical body.
Yes, and the source uses a quote from a Latter-day Saint leader, President Gordon B. Hinckley, to underline the sheer audacity of this claim.
What does he say?
He stated that Joseph Smith learned more in those few minutes about the nature of God than all of the learned divines of all time had ever learned.
All of the learned divines of all time. I mean, that is a massive, unapologetic flex by the text.
Oh, absolutely.
So wait, let me challenge the mechanics of this for a second. If this narrative claims God has a literal physical body of flesh and bone, doesn't that completely limit him?
In what way?
Well, the whole point of the traditional classical view of God is that he is an immaterial spirit, right? Which allows him to be everywhere at once, omnipresent.
Right, the traditional view.
Yeah, so how does this source reconcile an all-powerful creator who is essentially trapped in a physical form?
That is exactly the theological collision this text is instigating.
Oh, it knows it's causing a collision.
Totally. In classical theism, yes, God is without body, parts, or passions. But this narrative argues that having a perfected physical body isn't a limitation, it's the ultimate state of existence.
Interesting.
The mechanism of how God remains all-powerful while embodied isn't fully detailed in this specific account, but the broader theology implies that while God's physical person is in one specific location, his divine influence, his spirit or his power, extends uniformly throughout the universe.
Ah, I see. So the presence is everywhere, but the person is localized.
Precisely. And that leads directly to the second claim, which pushes this theological update even further. The narrative asserts that Jesus Christ is a completely separate and distinct physical person from God the Father.
Two separate people.
Right. To support this, the text brings in a quote from another leader, President Dallin H. Oakes. He points out that because Joseph Smith saw two distinct personages, two beings, it immediately shattered the prevailing beliefs concerning the Godhead.
We should probably define Godhead here, because that is a loaded term.
Definitely.
The prevailing belief of the time, the legacy code, if you will, was the traditional Trinity.
Right.
The idea that God the Father, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit are three persons but one single immaterial substance or entity.
Yes, the classic Trinitarian view established by the early Christian councils.
And this text is essentially saying, no, we have a primary source witness who physically saw two completely separate, distinct beings standing next to each other.
Yes.
That is a very binary, uncompromising claim. You either accept centuries of established philosophical consensus from the greatest scholars of antiquity, or you accept the claim of the kid in the woods who says he saw two guys.
It's a total paradigm shift. Think of it less like a software patch to an existing religion and more like a total wipe and reinstall of the operating system.
A total wipe.
Yeah, if the original source code of Christianity was lost or corrupted over centuries, this text is claiming 1820 was the reboot.
But what I find really compelling about the structure of this source material is how it suddenly shifts gears.
How do you mean?
Well, it spends the first half setting up these grand, cosmic, paradigm-shattering rules about the architecture of the universe, and then it immediately zooms into something intensely intimate and personal.
It does scale down from the infinite to the individual,
Yeah.
and that brings us to the third and fourth claims in the document. The third claim highlights a very specific, easily overlooked detail from the narrative. God the Father called Joseph by name before introducing his son.
Joseph, this is my beloved son.
Yes. And the document explicitly draws the conclusion that because of this interaction, we learn that the creator of the universe knows individuals by their specific names.
It's huge.
It reframes the divine from an abstract, distant, incomprehensible force into a deeply personal, localized being who knows who you are.
Wow.
And the fourth claim follows that exact same thread. God heard and answered a specific prayer from a specific teenager, which implies the mechanism of prayer is a literal, functional communication tool available today.
This changes the entire psychological landscape for the believer, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
I mean, if the prevailing idea was a distant, incomprehensible God, and this kid just met a God with a physical face and a voice who knows his name, it makes the universe feel a lot less like cold, unfeeling physics.
It provides immense psychological comfort and grounding. It suggests that human beings are not anomalies in the universe, but are structurally analogous to the divine.
And here is where the source material does something really interesting rhetorically. It doesn't just present this as cool historical trivia for you to memorize. It turns the camera around and points it directly at you, the listener.
Yes, it gets very personal.
The text includes a quote from President Russell M. Nelson, and he uses the 1820 story as a blueprint. He takes the narrative out of the 19th century and drops it right into your lap today.
He essentially treats the first vision as a replicable experiment.
Yes. Nelson asks directly, what wisdom do you lack? What do you feel an urgent need to know or understand? He's basically saying, look the pattern. This kid read James, he lacked wisdom, he went to a quiet place, and he asked. Nelson tells the reader to follow the exact same steps.
Find a quiet place.
Yeah. Humble yourself. Pour out your heart and ask for answers. It takes this earth-shattering theological event and turns it into a personal action item for a Tuesday afternoon.
It democratizes the experience of revelation. It proposes that the mechanism for receiving divine truth isn't locked away in antiquity, limited to ancient prophets in the desert, but is a living, active process available to anyone willing to run the experiment themselves.
So this raises a really intense complication, and it's one the text absolutely does not shy away from.
No, it doesn't.
Because right after setting up this beautiful, intimate idea of personal answers and redeeming light, the narrative takes a remarkably dark, almost violent turn.
It really does. We hit the fifth claim, and suddenly we are talking about the ultimate opposition. The document states very clearly, Satan is a real, literal being. He has tremendous power, but God's power is ultimately greater.
The way the text explores this opposition is incredibly striking to me. It relies on a quote from Elder Jeffrey R. Holland to explain the mechanics of this dark force.
Right.
He describes Satan as the very personification of evil, whose motives are always malicious. But the detail that really jumps off the page is how this entity reacts to truth.
The physical reaction.
Yeah. Holland says that this force literally converses at the appearance of redeeming light and the very thought of truth.
Convulses. That is a highly visceral, physical descriptor.
It really is.
The text is making it clear that this isn't just a polite disagreement or a philosophical difference of opinion between two forces. It's a violent, involuntary, physical reaction to light.
Wow.
The document notes that this force is eternally opposed to the love of God, to any work of peace, and specifically to the atonement of Jesus Christ.
Okay, let's pause and define atonement in the context of this theology, just to make sure we're all on the same page.
Good idea.
In this worldview, the atonement is essentially the central mechanism of rescue. It's the process by which Jesus overcomes death and human mistakes to bridge the gap back to God.
A perfect summary. It's the ultimate act of reconciliation. And the text argues that the opposition inherently, violently fights against that reconciliation whenever and wherever it can.
You know, it makes me think of this in terms of physics or even just brilliant narrative structure. Newton's third law. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction.
Right.
If we apply that to the framework of this source material, the text is saying that a moment of ultimate, universe-altering light, like what is described descending into that grove, cannot exist in a vacuum.
No, it can't.
It's inevitably going to draw out the ultimate convulsing opposition. If you are going to introduce an absolute pure truth into the system's inherent darkness is going to violently, aggressively push back.
That is a highly effective way to conceptualize the mechanics of what the document is arguing. The light and the dark are not passive, abstract concepts here. They are active, warring forces engaged in literal conflict.
Literal conflict.
Yeah, and if you read the full historical account of the first vision, Joseph Smith just describes being seized by a dark, paralyzing power right before the light appeared. The opposition tried to stop the event from happening.
It's the ultimate inciting incident of a hero's journey.
It really is.
Which leads us perfectly into the final claim in our source material, the sixth truth. Because this opposition, this darkness we're talking about, didn't just bother one teenager in the woods. It had a massive structural impact on human history.
Yes, we scale back out to the macro level. The sixth claim is the structural mandate of the entire text. It asserts that Jesus Christ's original church was no longer on the earth and that the entire gospel needed to be fully restored.
Right.
The text introduces the concept of the apostasy.
Okay, unpack the apostasy for us. Because we've used the metaphor of a system reboot, but how exactly did the system fail in the first place, according to this narrative?
The document uses a quote from President M. Russell Ballard to explain the mechanics of this failure. He points out that this apostasy, this falling away from the original organized church, wasn't an accident.
It wasn't an accident.
No, it was an anticipated structural failure prophesied by the founders of Christianity themselves.
Wait, so it was like a known bug in the system.
Exactly. Ballard specifically quotes the Apostle Paul from the New Testament in the book of 2 Thessalonians.
Okay.
Paul is writing to early Christians who are eagerly waiting for the second coming of the Savior, and Paul warns them, he says, that day shall not come except there come a falling away first.
A falling away first. So what does a falling away actually mean mechanically?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean people stopped being good or stopped trying to follow God, right?
No, not at all. The text is very careful to respect the faith of others. The falling away, in this theological framework, means the loss of authorized administration.
Authorized administration. Okay.
Think of the game of telephone played over centuries. If the original source code, the divine authority given to the ancient apostles, was lost when they were killed, then every subsequent translation, every cultural shift, every well-meaning council of men just introduced more bugs into the software.
Ah, I see.
The original authority to act in God's name was gone from the earth.
So let me synthesize this, because this is the absolute linchpin of the whole document. The text isn't just claiming that Joseph Smith had a really profound, deeply personal spiritual awakening in the woods that made him a kinder person.
Right.
It's claiming that the entire religious structure of the world at that time was fundamentally broken. The institutional authority had crashed.
Exactly.
Therefore, this vision in 1820 wasn't just a personal greeting. It was the initiation of a complete top-down restoration. Because the authority was gone, a 14-year-old couldn't just join an existing church. A new one had to be built from the ground up, authorized directly by the Creator.
That is the ultimate so what of this source material. It weaves a deeply personal, quiet moment in a grove of trees into the grand sweep of human history and cosmic conflict.
Yeah.
It connects the boy to an institutional mandate that claims to correct a centuries-long historical rupture.
It is incredibly ambitious to look at a farm boy and say, that is where the universe pivoted.
And what's truly interesting is how the source material chooses to conclude after laying out these massive claims.
How does it wrap up?
Well, after presenting sweeping historical context and intense theological rules, it doesn't just end with a period or a summary statement. It ends with a series of direct question marks aimed right at the reader.
It turns the camera back onto the audience one last time.
Exactly. The text asks, have you asked God for knowledge or wisdom regarding your testimony of the restored gospel?
Wow.
And then it asks, in what ways has the answer you received blessed your life? It is aggressively pushing the reader to move from being a passive consumer of historical information to an active participant in the theology.
It wants you to do the experiment.
Yes. It encourages readers to share these experiences with their family and close friends. It wants the narrative to be spoken aloud. And it also mentions, quite practically for the modern age, that there is a highly produced 4-minute video version of the vision available to watch.
Oh, a 4-minute video for the visual learners out there. I love that.
Right.
But I also love that the text ends on those direct questions because it brings us right back to the core universal theme that we can all extract from this deep dive, regardless of our personal theological leanings.
The prerequisite for learning anything new.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The universal application here is the idea that monumental shifts in understanding whether we are talking about a new theological paradigm, a massive scientific breakthrough, or just a deeply necessary pivot in your own personal life or career, they almost always begin with a single, sincere question.
Mm-hmm.
They begin with someone having the sheer humility to stop, look at the world, and admit, I lack wisdom. I do not know the answer.
You cannot fill a cup that believes it's already full. This narrative suggests that the sincere acknowledgement of ignorance is the exact catalyst required for the reception of profound truth.
Beautifully said.
Okay.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the source material, I want to leave you listening with something to ponder that really builds on the premise of everything we've discussed today.
Sure.
We started by imagining a teenager testing a single sentence from a book. This text places immense world-shifting power in the incredibly simple act of stepping away from the noise, finding a physical, quiet grove, and asking a question into the silence.
Right.
And it makes me think about the reality of our world today. In our modern era of constant notifications, endless scrolling, 247 news cycles, and absolute information overload, what profound answers might you be missing simply because you haven't taken the time to find your own quiet place to ask the big questions?
Thank you for joining us for this day in His story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in His story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the homeschool for faith and family.